Alright, welcome to another lovely edition of Java Enterprise Edition. Today I'm going to be working with Heroku based on expanding our application a little bit further to use a database. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down a copy of the previous work. So to clone this, I clone it, I open up my NetBeans. You'll notice today I'm working on my Mac rather than Windows or my Linux machine. NetBeans pretty well works the same just about everywhere. You just got to be careful with which version, especially for what we're doing. NetBeans 8.2 is going to do just fine. We're going to clone down that repository. So paste the URL, put it wherever, and next, finish. Once this is pulled down, I'm going to open it up, and as you guys have seen before, when we do that, we have some issues. Some of the source packages aren't going to be fully happy with me, so I want to make sure I clean and build the project. And this is going to pull down any of the dependencies I don't have, like the app assembler, Tomcat, and so on. While that's building, I want to take a quick glance around through Heroku. You'll notice that on the application that I had last week, so if we bring this up and we open the app, this is still running. You'll notice though that right now, this is the first time I've loaded it in a week. It's taken a little bit of time. It's waiting and waiting, but it did load. What was going on there was that in the time between when I clicked that open app and this page appeared, it was spinning up a new instance of the application infrastructure in the back end. So Heroku has its own little server that it deployed this application to, and then it had to wait until that application was listening before I got this on my screen. But it's important to note that was measured in seconds, not minutes. So spinning up that new server, putting the application on it, and making the application ready to go, seconds. So if I hit that link again, you'll see almost instantaneous, because the application is already up and loaded. Alright. My build succeeded. Just to make sure that everything is going kosher, we're going to run this project. It's taking its sweet time here. Oh, it's mad at me. It says address already in use. What that means is that something else is holding on to port 8080. There are a couple solutions I can go on here. I don't really want to be bothered doing a really deep dive on what might be set on port 8080 on my development machine for work. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to show you plan B. The default that we set here in main is to use 8080. I'm going to use 8888 instead. So when I stop this application, run it again, what happens when I run it again is that it says I'm listening on port 8888. You could do yourself a favor somewhere in here and put, listening on http://localhost : plus web port. And what that would do is the next time I run this, in the server log that comes up here, somewhere in here, it will say listening on the URL. And there we have it. So that application is still running, still working. It's a slightly different application than this one here, even though they kind of look the same, just based on where it's running. Also, this one had that super trivial change. All right, so what I wanted to get back to here is this idea of Heroku add-ons. So right now, if I want to configure an add-on, I can pop in here and find more add-ons. The current dyno type I have, which is a free dyno, costs nothing. Dyno is the name they have for a little server. If I go to the add-ons, then I can pop through and see a bunch of different options for what kind of add-ons I might have. So Redis, MySQL, MongoLab, ClearDB MySQL, and so on and so forth. Heroku has a built-in system for Postgres, so that's one that they host themselves. If you're more familiar with MySQL, then ClearDB MySQL or JAWSDB MySQL almost certainly have some sort of free introductory level. There are also other kind of utilities, like data store utilities, which allow connecting to other pieces, monitoring systems, logging systems. We use Papertrail at work. Mailing systems. So it turns out that actually sending mail is a real pain in the backside because there is so much spam protection. So using a system like Mailgun or SendGrid allows you to shortcut that process by using their API, and then they will send the mail through all of those whitelisting processes. There are caching systems, error and exception systems. We use a combination of Rollbar and a bit of Bugsnag at work as well. If you want to take a shortcut, you can have Heroku set up a CMS for you or a search system. And there are more and more and more options. We are actually just going to go with one of the first ones here. So we're going to use Heroku Postgres. Now, Heroku Postgres, you may not be familiar with Postgres. Postgres is a free and open source database system, and it allows us to set up a fairly common system, basically something that's going to listen to our really simple inserts, updates, deletes, selects, stuff like that. So for this application that I'm running here, as I mentioned, this dry basin, yada yada yada, is not the same as this application that I'm running. So what I need to do now is, for this application that I'm running here, I need to go find it. So that cloned down into NetBeans Projects Heroku 2019. Let me just zoom in a little bit. All right. So the project here, if I run Heroku create, that does quite a few things. But one of the big things that it does is it sets up not just the app, but also the Git repo. So if I do git remote show, you can see that there's two. One is Heroku, one is Origin. Origin, in this case, would be GitHub. But Heroku is where I would be able to fire this. If I git push Heroku master, What that's going to do is it's going to take the master branch, which is the default standard, and push that up to the Heroku repository. You'll see that as it does this, boom, 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 down it goes. It's running through Maven. It does all of the dependency management that we've already seen, but this is running it off of the Heroku services. Heroku is backed on top of AWS. So this downloading process, that downloaded quite a bit, and it did it quite fast. Then it compresses it down, and the compressed version is 63 megs. So it's running this very, very quick on very intensive hardware, and then launching. And very shortly, we're going to have this launched and available. Very shortly. Maybe. Oh. It was scrolled up slightly. We can use Heroku Open to launch that in the web browser, and you can see that here. We can also see, if I go back to my personal, that I now have Rhubarb Cupcake here. So if I go to Rhubarb Cupcake, I can configure my add-ons, and on this one, I am going to add, notice how they're in a different order now? Trying to be unbiased. Trying. We're going to pick the Heroku Postgres, install that, the Hobby Dev free. We need to give it a name, so you'll note that my name is Rhubarb Cupcake, completely arbitrary. And then we can provision the add-on. There's documentation in the Dev Center article. If you're not familiar with Postgres, you're going to want to pop over and take a look at that. It gets you into some pretty basic stuff, but also includes the more complex pieces of connecting in Java, so going through that JDBC URL and what dependencies you need, and so forth and so on. You'll notice here that it's using the system get environment. We'll talk about this in a moment when we get everything back up. Okay. I now have this attached as database. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back over here to my application, and I'm going to set up a fairly straightforward DB-utils class like we've seen before. The DB-utils class, we're going to borrow some of that material from here, like the private static get connection. Now it wants to know all of the various interesting pieces. Oh, too used to Alt-Shift. We can do the individual piece by piece for all of the exceptions. But just piecing this together, what this does is it fires off to the driver manager to get connection for the database URL, and that comes from the environment variable. In order for that to work, we do need to have this downloaded. So this is the Postgres JDBC driver. So in my POM, I need to add that to my list of dependencies. Okay. All right. If you want to, it looks like you can parse this a little bit more deeply. But what I'm going to check right now is our environment variables on our application. So on the application, you can see your config vars. And revealing the config vars will show you that there is already a database URL. But it looks like there's no JDBC database URL. There's just the regular one. So we can use this to parse together the proper JDBC URL. It uses the URI to grab database URL as a URI and then splits it up. So the username, the password, we will also need to add username and password here. So that creates the proper JDBC URL. All right. The next thing that we need is to make sure that we have access to this tool. So from here, we can go over to our Hello World REST. Yeah, we'll do it here. Actually, no. I will make a brand new Java class called DB Sample REST. And DB Sample REST is going to have a path of DB sample. From here, we're going to have a public string for get all that is going to return a result. And just to make sure that I've got everything lined up, I'm going to make sure that we pull this into the application config. So remember, in our application config, where we had Hello World REST and Faker REST, we also need DB sample REST.class. If these weren't in the same package, we would either need to import them here or have the fully qualified package name. But since they are in the same package, it's easy to pull across. All right, our DB utils breaks all this down, and we're going to have a method called getConnection. In our sample over here, that means I want a connection. One second. Private static connection, get connection. Private. That was the problem. We need to be public if we're going to use it across classes. If we wanted it to be private, we would have to take this method and put it over there. But in the case where you have you want to have a single place of configuration. So now we have that get connection. That, of course, needs the import, and we're going to have to also deal with try-catch issues. So we're going to surround the block with try-catch. And we're going to make a multi-catch here. Be lazy. No? Oh. It's angry at me because it's requiring an earlier version of Java syntax. We'll be fine. Because we have a return statement here, but it's possible to catch and get out, we also want a return statement for if nothing happens. I'll get into responses a little bit deeper a little later on. Maybe not in this lesson, but a way to set a 500 error, for example. All right, we have a connection. What we are going to do with that connection is we're going to build a statement. And with the statement, we are going to execute. All right. Now we want this to be useful both locally and on the web. So as I finish this up, we're going to be moving towards creating a sample database here. Execute query is what it wants. So I'll be making a local sample database, which you'll be able to see, and then I'll do the exact same thing over in Postgres. All right. We're just going to have a sample database that is IDs and names, real simple. Yeah. We'll go with /n and see what happens. It might actually just print /n for us, which is not what we really want, but we'll take what we get. Okay, so to get this going and to make sure that I have everything running, I'm going to connect to my sample database. And we're going to make a new table. Actually, we're going to be really lazy here. We're going to execute the command, create table sample int ID. No. And then name. It's going to be a varchar. We're also going to insert into sample the values 1 hello 2 world. So when it tells me exactly what I did wrong, it doesn't like the special character there for name. Name is a keyword. I'm not familiar enough with JavaDB to know. Okay, it accepted the double quotes, and you'll notice that we now have ID and name. Okay. So to backtrack here, I've created a sample database. I've created it locally. And the reason I've created it locally is because I'm actually going to pull out this piece too. So, let's see. Okay. With the driver, we're going to have another option. So, let's get env. Then the driver would be Derby. What this does is make a quick and cheap, we're going to remove that. We're going to abstract that. Specifically, what this is going to do for us in the case where it's localhost, and it will use Derby and have no extra at the end. And the reason we want no extra at the, well actually, we do want extra at the end. We want /app, or no, /sample, which is the database name. So we do want this. Postgres does it differently, so it doesn't take that reference. It just needs the username and password. What this does, the SSL mode equals require, that makes it so that the database connection uses SSL, which is not plain text. Localhost, JavaDB doesn't have that option. Okay. I also, similar to what we did with the POM, I'm going to need to pull in the JavaDB driver, which I don't remember off heart, so it's Maven repository, Derby client. I seem to remember that the first one didn't work for me the last time I tried it, so we're going to go with a slightly older one. Good old Lucky 13. And we're going to add that to the POM as well. Okay. From here, where we are, if I've done everything right, which would be a surprise at the rate I'm going, but if I've done everything right, then when I run this project, after closing the other one, when I run this project, it goes and pulls those down, it yells at me. What did it yell at me for? It's telling me that it can't find the Derby locales. I wonder if that'll be a problem. We are gonna find out. Okay. On my localhost 8080, on my API, we had that DB sample path and 404. This is way simpler. This is just me being an idiot. There we are. So when I stop this and then start it again, it will yell at me and tell me all that. All right. What I've completely forgotten to do was all of these steps I made this code for. We need 2 environment variables. To set them here within the Java project, you can go to run and 1 second. I've just got to find them. These are where you would set your virtual machine options. I'm just trying to make sure that I have an easy way to set environment variables. There will probably be somewhere that I am overlooking from not having to do this on the Mac recently. There's really not much there. All right. Bear with me a moment. We're going to do the sensible thing. Oh, welcome to April Fools, by the way, from our good friends at Stack Overflow. Run project, set properties, add. Okay. Properties. Run. Actions. There we are. That's what we're looking for. So in this case, my database URL is going to be what we would borrow from here, which, bear with me a moment, I'm going to copy. and then localhost true will also set the this one. Making sure I've got that one turned off for this one to turn on. Okay, seems to have started up. For the record, all of these are telling me that it can't find the locales for a bunch of languages I don't speak, which I'm okay with at this stage. All right. We've received a null pointer exception for the get connection line 41, which is actually probably a good sign. It's saying that I can't find the username and password here, which is true. I didn't have the username and password. So in my run project, I'm adding app:app at. This is how you add a username and password to a URL. All right. And we are still having the same issue. Null pointer exception on line 41 telling me that db URI get user info split on the colon section 0. Alright guys, I'm going to get real lazy right now. So with this, on this side, it's going to make the connection if I'm on Postgres. And then I'm going to hijack this. And as I say, be real lazy about this, where I'm just going to copy the JDBC URL rather than fighting on air. So that the URL is that. Username is app. Password is app. Okay. Close my latest version. Give it a restart. And there we are. Hello and world. If we view the page source, those will be on two separate lines, but viewed as a browser, they're one line. So, what that's telling me right now is that I have a local working copy of an application. If I commit this, so I go to team. Actually, I'm going to do this from the command line because the push from NetBeans does not work with Heroku very well. So, when you do git commit, you've got a couple of command line options. -A means add anything that's changed. However, we also, if we look at the git status, you'll notice that there's a bunch of stuff here in the source that hasn't been added yet. So long story short, I'm going to git add dot. Dot means the current folder. When I do this git status now, it says all of those things are now added. When we do git commit -am, the -a is add anything that's been changed. The -m is with a message. If I don't do this, what happens is this lovely thing. So this message right here would be useful and functional and easy to do. If I just type git commit and hit enter, it will default to my preferred command line text editor, which in this case is Vim. So if you're not familiar with Vim, this could be a very bad time. For me, it's okay. So I would leave some meaningful message about the change, or in this case, oh come on. And now I can git push Heroku master. This is going to fail the first time I run it. And the reason it's going to fail is because we don't have a table named sample on the Postgres database. So we'll give this a little bit of time to load up. And then when we get to the end, I will add some stuff, but I want to show you what it looks like when it fails, so that when it fails for you, you know what to look for. So again, from our Rhubarb Cupcake database, we can open the app, and then it's /API/DB sample. And you can see here, it is failing completely, and it's failing because it's got a null pointer exception on dbutils Java 40. Actually, that is the same line that was failing before. No, that's not the same line. Ah. This is ridiculous. Here. That's my fault. So if this doesn't exist, it resolves to null. And trying to do is equals on null fails. So there's two solutions we have. I'm going to show you both of them. This one we will commit later on, eventually, sometime. The other way is that we set localhost to be false or anything. So adding that there, you'll note I have not redeployed the application. But now I get a whole different issue. Now I get nothing. Precisely nothing. Now, the reason I'm getting nothing is because in my code for the DB sample REST, we catch the SQL exceptions, fire them to the logger, and return an empty string. While we're having fun with this, we can use Heroku logs to tail, and you'll see that right there is the application that failed. I'm going to run that down a couple lines and hit refresh here. If we scroll back up, you can see here in get all, there was severe null, relation sample does not exist at position 15 in the Postgres yada 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 yada. Long story short, what it's telling me is that I don't have a database. So what I can do is use the PGPSQL, This works for me right here because I have the Postgres command line tool. You may need to install that on your machine. But it'll bring me into the Postgres command line tool by logging in to the actual server that is out in the cloud. I'm going to create the table sample, which is ID int and name varchar 255, and it worked. And then I'm going to insert into sample ID name values 1 hello 2 world. Postgres doesn't like my quotes. There you are. Just to prove that's there, select star from sample. Hello and world. If I refresh this page, there we are. From Heroku, I am getting contents from a database. Now, this is just one way to access a database. There are several other ways to access a database, and I would highly recommend using a system like the Java Persistence API. For now, though, we've got what we've got, and it works how it works. But you'll notice if I look at the breakdown of what I've done today, to our main, we changed the port just a little bit. And the only reason we changed that is because I have a work server running on port 8080. And I didn't want to hunt it down. We also gave ourselves the handy favor of listening on a URL that we could copy. Then I created the dbutils. dbutils is a method for getting the connection. We adapted this fairly liberally from the Heroku guidelines. The first half of it here was taking the system environment variable called database URL and then splitting it into its component parts of username, password, host, port, path, and any extra bits. Using that, we're able to create a database connection. Similarly, we used some old school database connection schemes to connect to a local system. From this database connection, we built a RESTful web service to get some sort of result. Now, this is a really basic RESTful web service that doesn't actually deal with any proper entities. So if we wanted to deal with an entity-rich database, it's best to use an entity framework like the Java Persistence API, Hibernate, whatever you want to call it today. Okay, so with our simple result, we were able to build a page and get some feedback. From here, it's also important to remember that we used a handful of commands. Also, if you are in Heroku Postgres command line, the way to quit it is /q. Okay, we used a handful of Heroku useful commands like Heroku create, which created our app. We used Heroku, Heroku open, which opens our app. We also used Heroku PG PSQL, which connects to the instance of our application's Postgres database. Let's see, what else have we got? We used Heroku logs to read the logs. If you just do Heroku logs, it will plop out the last few pages of your logs. If you do Heroku logs -- tail, it will follow that, so that as I make more requests, you will see that that latest request came through in the log. Let's see, what else have we got? The git push Heroku master is one thing. We also have git push origin master. So this is going to allow me to push that up to GitHub. So origin being, where's my mouse cursor? GitHub, Heroku being the other version. We do have some outstanding things, so we're going to git commit -am fixing the null issue in the DB, and push those both to Heroku master and origin master. In this case, we'll do this one first because it's faster. All right. And one of the last things that I want to review is this idea of using config variables. You'll see that one of the config variables it gives you is your database URL, and you can add more. Okay. At this stage, I think I've covered everything I'd like to cover with this video. It's just shy of an hour, so hopefully you haven't fallen asleep, and if you have, feel free to watch it again a little bit faster the second time. If you're unfamiliar with that, you can look up how to watch videos faster on YouTube. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in class.